Hey everyone, welcome
I'm not
to
sure how
Sunny.
it helps, but I'm learning more every day.
Did you hear that? That was
Yeah,
the Google
yeah.
Home.
Google Home's learning more every day.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to Sunny Commutes, a podcast where I combine the worlds of web development and business and share my experiences. This is podcast episode 70, where I was going to have initially Elon Musk join and talk about lessons in podcasting, but he canceled once again. I do have another guest who's going to have to fill in his shoes, and we're going to kind of share our own experiences with podcasting from both of our podcasts that we do. And so, Pradip, welcome to the podcast. What's going on, man?
Thank you, Sonny. Thank you for inviting me. I don't think I can live up to Elon's reputation, but I appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast.
Yeah, so Pradeep is definitely has done a lot. So he's a speaker, he's a podcaster, a blogger, an entrepreneur. And Pradeep, you can probably explain a little bit more about kind of what you do and things like that.
Sure. So I've been freelancing for about 15 years on and off. I love doing project work, any kind of projects that come about, and I'm something that I'm interested in. I usually take it on, and then I currently work full time, so project work is always done on a case by case basis. I just love building digital products and providing services to small and medium companies in the product management kind of consulting space.
That's awesome. And obviously, I think we both share in that, passion for building products, building things online, businesses, of course. And that's actually one of the ways that we've met. Haven't met in person yet. Hopefully, we get to do a meetup or something in the future.
Definitely.
But we met through an online community. It's called Maker's Kitchen. And it's a community on Slack. It's based around just different makers, so people that love to build products, just different tools and apps online. And so I know that we probably have connected over podcasting because I shared a lot about my side business, which is podcasting related, and about, of course, this podcast. And we actually had an initial, just kind of offline 30-minute call. And we got to learn a little bit, about each other, about what we each did. And kind of just jumping into, what this topic today is about. We both started podcast. I started about 2 years ago, and I want to Pradeep just kind of get into letting me and my audience know about how you started your podcast, because I know that you did it a little bit differently, which is perfect because there are different lessons that we can kind of share about the different things that we learned throughout this podcasting journey. So just curious, Pradeep, how did you initially start your podcast idea and kind of get into that process?
Sure, definitely. So around about April of 2018, I decided I wanted to do something different, and a podcast was something that I've wanted to do for a while, but I just never got around to doing it. So in April of 2018, I had some time, and I thought of an idea, a concept as to what I wanted to do. I made my first recording in May of 2018. And then since May of 2018, I have recorded a total of 16 episodes, but I've only released one. I, I decided on a concept, but it was a situation where I wanted to learn how to edit and do the entire process end to end myself. And I decided that I wanted to do video as well. So, if you watch my first episode, I had 3 cameras going. I had a guest. It was an interview format with another product manager. I had 3 cameras going. I had 2 mics, a light for the lighting purposes, and it was overwhelming because I never was into audiovisual. So initially capturing the video, capturing the audio, talking on the podcast, and then doing all the editing and things like that, it was a bit of a learning experience for me. So I'm still in the process of editing them. I've released one. I have edited about another 5 or 6, and then the remaining I still have to edit.
Yeah, so you kind of, I guess, was your main idea to really jump in strong in terms of the quality and production of the entire setup?
I I wanted to have it a good quality, but I also wanted to just learn how to use the equipment because at the end of the day,
Right.
one of the early lessons that I've learned is you could have the best equipment and not know how to use it, and the sound quality can turn out really bad. And I think the first episode, the sound quality wasn't that great. Episodes, I think 3 and 4, I didn't even use the mics. I had the DSLR
Yeah.
camera. We were talking in the mics, but the mics weren't turned on. I forgot to press the record button, and the audio which I captured was the audio from the DSLR using a Rode mic, a video mic, a Rode video mic.
Right. It
On
was
top
just
of it.
drastically worse than the official mics that you were planning to use, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
you could have the best equipment in the world, but unless you know how to use it, and unless you have a good story, it really doesn't matter. And that's one of the lessons that I learned early on, that equipment doesn't matter in the beginning. It's really just being in front of the camera, talking on to the mic, and just getting used to that. Because the very first episode, I did the introduction about 4 or 5 times. I started it, and then I messed something up, and then I restarted it, took a break, restarted it. So being on camera and talking to a mic was strange for me because I've never done that. So
Yeah. It's
there's a
it's
lot
all a
of
learning experience first time. Yeah.
exactly there was a
And
lot of different learning experiences.
I can definitely relate to that. I mean, even on this episode, this is the 70th episode, so I've definitely done this enough times. But I still had to, re-record the intro 3 times, literally on this episode. And I definitely, in the past, especially early on, I probably re-recorded like entire episodes. Granted, they were, short 5-10 minutes, but I would record it and I'm like, I messed up here and there. I didn't really get the main idea or story out, or I just wanted to compress it. So I definitely re-recorded, and I think this is especially harder on solo episodes because with a guest, it's kind of easy to bounce back and forth, right? But for solo episodes, it's kind of just you and getting a continuous flow of ideas, right?
Definitely. I mean, I get where you're coming from, and you want it to be perfect. But then, as I've recorded these episodes, I realized that, a couple of years down the road, I want to be able to see the progress. So if I try to make everything 100% from the beginning, there's no progress. So,
Right.
I've realized that it doesn't have to be perfect. There could be mistakes. The first one I released, the sound wasn't that great. I sat and watched it 3 times, and I contemplated, should I release it? Should I not release it? In the end, I thought, you know what? It's a learning experience. By the time I'm on episode, whatever, looking back, I'll be able to see, hey, I went from here to here, and that's progression, and that's something that's good.
Right. And the first one, you actually had a really good interview. I think it was with a product manager, right?
Yes,
Um,
product manager from
yeah,
the MBA.
yeah. And so it was, even, I mean, I feel like anyone that's listening, like, okay, sure, if I'm listening to anything or just watching a video, I will notice the quality, but what will keep me engaged is not the quality of something. There's so many, there's so much content out there. And there's a lot that's actually high quality or in terms of production, but the ones I think stick it through, for 5, 10 plus years are the ones that actually share a story and actually get the audience to relate to what you're saying. If I'm listening to an interview that you're doing, if I can actually get some value out of it, I don't really care how bad the quality is, right? And I can also definitely excuse it, especially knowing that I can follow along with you on that journey to just, you'll improve your equipment, you'll learn how to use it, and then later on episodes, like, it's going to get better. But I feel like following along with that journey, especially in podcasting, it's so personal. And so just, learning those lessons is the best way to go. And I've definitely been able to go back myself as well and just go, wow, I didn't even realize this episode is 1 or 2 years old, but I can drastically see the difference between that episode and the one that I released like last week. So yeah, it's crazy to kind of just go through that journey, I think.
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, when I was before I was before I recorded the first episode, I thought to myself, what do I want the episode to be and who my target audience is going to be? You want to make it either something of entertainment value, something of educational value, or some kind of encouragement value. And, you know, the story, in my opinion, and I agree with you, is the most important aspect to any podcast, because without the story, without the connection to the listener, people won't be attracted to listen to the next episode. So, as you're scrolling through your phone trying to listen to figure out what you're listening to, the image that you use and the show notes are very important, because they're the things that people initially look at, and then once they press play, you want to keep them engaged, or you want to keep them, getting something out of it, and the story is the most important part. Once you've got the story down packed, then you can move into improving your equipment and getting an intro. What I've done is the 16 episodes that I've recorded, I'm going to call that season 1. And then for season 2, I'm working with somebody to create an intro, like a 5-second intro piece of music, and maybe an outro at the end, just to try and liven it up and make it more professional sounding. Is it necessary? I don't think so. But when you listen to some podcasts and they have a 3 to 5 second intro, it sounds pretty, upbeat, and hopefully creates a brand out of that, if that makes sense. I'm not sure where I'm going exactly with that.
That's actually a great point regarding the brand, because when you think about just going back to TV, right, like traditional media, when you're watching sitcoms, there's always that jingle, that song that you're that the episode is starting. It's like you're sit down, you get about to watch an episode of your favorite show, and so it's predictable. You know what you're getting yourself into, and it makes you happy, right? So I think the same thing applies to podcasting.
Absolutely. That way, that's the conversation I had with this musician who's creating it for me. It's the jingle, but it's also 3 to 5 seconds, and every time you play it, people recognize what it is and who's going to be on it. So that's the intent. So season 2 would be hopefully a little bit more polished, because I've had 16 times practicing recording, but it's still not where I want it to be. But it's definitely better than episode 1.
So I'm actually really interested about the whole recording ahead of time and then releasing. I guess first of all, what's your plan in terms of you've gotten your first episode out? Are you planning on releasing an episode per week, per month? What's kind of your plan on getting that whole season out?
So initially, I thought I would release 10 at a time, and then have something for listeners to listen to. But then, with my work schedules and trying to get everything fit in, I released one. I've recorded a few, but I haven't released them. So I'm not sure where I fit on that right now. Right now, I think what I'm going to do is just release them as I edit and I feel comfortable releasing them. But for season 2, I think what I'd like to do maybe is have them recorded in batches and released in batches, or release them once a week, so there's some kind of consistency that listeners will know that every Monday a new episode drops. So I haven't quite figured out what my preferred method is. I'm still thinking that through, but I'm leaning towards that once a week maybe, so that there's a consistency. And I'd like to build up an email list, so that currently on my website I do have an email capture form, and that way I can start sending out an email notification that, hey, the podcast is here, a few notes and other things that go with it, to try and build a relationship with the audience.
Mm-hmm. I definitely feel like, so I guess, so kind of going back a little bit, in terms of the equipment, I think doing, just kind of, summing up a little bit, I think that doing some test recordings at first is crucial to just making sure that you don't have to re-record, everything is working, right? I think if you did that for the first episode, made sure that both mics are getting picked up, then the audio would be fine in that case. But lesson learned again, and you can fix it in future episodes. And then re-recording multiple times I think is perfectly fine.
Absolutely.
Once you get into the groove of it, you're gonna get better. And me personally, I'm terrible at public speaking. I'm not very, definitely introverted, but what this podcast has helped me do is get better at it. So you improve on your craft in terms of, public speaking skills, learning how to use camera equipment, audio equipment. You can get into other venues like video editing and streaming and things like that. So I think you'll definitely agree with me here, like in terms of picking up skills in podcasting and transferring those skills. You can definitely do that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, before I recorded the first episode of my podcast, I actually sat down with my 13-year-old and made him record a podcast with me, which he was a little bit reluctant, but I think he enjoyed it in the end. So we were sitting in our living room with all the cameras and the mics, and I did a test record. It sounded pretty good, but when you're actually doing it and you have a guest, you want to feel comfortable and confident doing it, and sometimes you just forget things because there's so many different things that you need to be aware of. But absolutely, once you start doing it, the skills that you pick up are amazing. As for public speaking, I've given speeches at workshops and conventions and things like that. The largest number of people I've spoken at a workshop or an event is about 300 people. So public speaking has been fun for me, but for some reason, when you put a mic and a camera in front of me, it feels different, because even right now I'm sitting here with a mic, I've got my camera, and then I've got a light. So talking to you, it seems natural, but it just seems, different, if that makes sense. Whereas talking...
Well, we don't even have we're not even doing a like a webcam share or anything. I can't see your face right now. So it's definitely very different, because we're gonna post edit and combine both videos together. But yeah, having the conversation feels natural, but it's definitely just so much stuff going on. So I definitely agree.
Definitely, and when you're talking to people, you talk and you look at people, and then they're nodding their heads, and you feel they're listening, they're getting what you're saying, and then they're somewhat agreeing with you. Whereas in a podcast, in this situation, I'm talking to a mic, looking at myself in the camera. I don't know what your reactions or, what you're looking at. So it's slightly different, but, the podcasts that I've done, I've had the guests so far sit across the table for me. So that's helped, because I can see their, reactions, they're nodding their head, and, it creates more of a personal feeling, if you will. But it's still not the same, because you still have a camera and a microphone that you're talking into, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Body language, I think, is super important.
Definitely.
When it comes to just conversations. Yeah. And then the second thing, so in terms of releasing, and this is kind of what we touched upon in terms of recording all episodes ahead of time versus kind of what I do, which is I record an episode per week and I release it every week. Now, it's very hard, I think, if you do it the weekly way, it's very hard to stay consistent with that.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is just to release and stay consistent, because your audience is going to be, seeing, Sunny's releasing an episode every week. And it just kind of keeps, those topics in your personal brand in their heads at all times, versus if you post here and there, you post just one time last month, and then you're active this month, and then you kind of get off of it. People definitely will kind of forget, and they're not going to continue to see your brand. So I think in that sense, if you have trouble just recording weekly and staying consistent with it, I'm actually really for the just record a couple episodes at least, so you don't have to go all in and record an entire season. But I think the nice compromise you can make is record maybe 3 episodes, record maybe 6 episodes, and they can be a combination of interviews. So I think I personally really learned that I enjoy doing interviews, and they're a little bit more casual in that case, making it a little bit easier for me, like I said, having a guest kind of fill in and have more of a conversation, and then just having a couple episodes just kind of ready to go. You can post for 3 weeks and then focus on other things, or record the next 3. So what do you think about that? Is that something you might consider for maybe a second season? How do you feel having done the 16 episodes up ahead of time?
I would agree with you. I like the idea of being consistent, because it really, you build that relationship with the audience. So while I haven't fully decided, but I'm leaning towards what you're saying, getting getting a couple of episodes and recording them together and start releasing week by week, because it shows you're consistent. So I 100% agree with you on that.
And then I think the third main lesson here is preparing notes for each episode. Early on, and this is when I started recording the podcast in the car during my commutes, I would just kind of have, my headphone mic and just, spit out random thoughts that I would normally have in my head anyway. And I kind of just do that in the car, record, and then publish later on. And so I learned actually, when you do it that way, this is when I was re-recording a lot, because I had all the different thoughts and different kind of like, pieces of what I wanted to talk about jumbled in my head. But when I just sat down and took maybe 15 minutes to an hour even just to prepare the notes, so that I would have really nice notes to know what I'm talking about in terms of the structure for the episode. I think that really helps in terms of speaking, but then also for people listening, because they can follow along more easily. So I know you actually have gone a little bit beyond with this in terms of like creating a product for this. So I'm really interested to hear about kind of how your process in creating your episode notes.
Definitely. So before I recorded the first episode, I thought I need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I pretty much drew 3 columns, if you will, in a blank piece of paper, and started making notes, little bullet points for what I want to talk about in the beginning, the middle, and end. And then I had that piece of paper near me, but it didn't look professional. So I went out and got a little blue book like this, what I'm showing on the screen, and I started writing notes for the beginning, middle, and end for each of the episodes. And around about episode 5 or 6, I started realizing that I have a bunch of episodes. I have audio equipment that I need to set up, and I had a separate file, piece of paper, whatever you want to call it, on how to connect my mic, get all the software settings correct, and do a test run. So I had a step-by-step process on setting up the equipment. Then I had each of the episodes where I had the beginning, middle, and end. So from the start of thinking about the episode to the point where I was ready to release it with the show notes and getting the images and, what have you, right up until the end, it was a somewhat similar process. And as I thought about it more, I thought, hey, each of the episodes are somewhat similar, so why not create a what's the word I'm looking for? Why not create a structure where I can take this notebook with me and have everything I need written down, and I can take it with me into the recording. So I got a blank piece of paper and just started drawing out how I want each of the pages to be. And then I got a professional to actually create the layout in Adobe in the Adobe suite. And then I had it printed as a book. So give me 1 second. I can't reach that book with my hand. So I'm going to put the speaker, my headphone down. And I'm going to show it on the camera if that's okay. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. I know you're going to send me that book, the notebook, this weekend. So I'm actually really interested in looking at it.
So I'm back. All right. So this is what it looks like. Podcaststuffnotebook.com. Shameless plug. Thank you, Sonny. So basically it gives you everything you need to launch a podcast from absolutely nothing. Not everything is in this book. This book is for 12 episodes. It has a few notes regarding equipment setup and things like that, but there's an accompanying PDF that I'm in the process of creating, where the idea is you can actually set up your podcast in 30 days.
So it's kind of perfect for this. It's essentially the lessons that you learned in making the episodes, and you just put that all into a notebook where the structure and everything that you would need to create a podcast is all in there, right?
Correct. So basically, I use this for the story and the direction, being accountable to myself, planning each episode, managing the launch and the schedule, making notes, and the workflow. So everything that you need when you're actually recording would be in this book. and then the accompanying PDF would be the background of what I think should be done versus what I did. So it would be a how-to, but also lessons learned and things like that from my experience. Now, I'm no way in any shape or form an expert on podcasting. My audio and video isn't that great, but I can talk about the process going from having an idea to actually releasing an episode. So I can talk about how I thought about the idea, talk about who my target audience is, or the listeners are, and the process to actually launch an episode or a podcast, minus all the technical stuff, because I'm still figuring that out myself.
So in terms of getting started, what sort of, besides the notebooks, I think that's an amazing resource. I'll definitely link that in the show notes, and hope that any podcaster listening to this picks it up and looks at it.
Thank you.
What other resources would you recommend, including equipment, but then maybe services and tools? There's definitely some stuff that I use, but what did you use to launch your podcast?
So I use Audition and Premiere for the audio and the video. They're the only two Adobe tools that I've used. I know there's a ton of others, but honestly, tools at this point, if you're just starting out, don't get too caught up in mics, which one's good or which camera. I would just say right now, go to your computer, go to your phone, and just record, because getting that experience talking to a machine, whether it be a mic or a camera, that's really more important, getting that story. So while tools and equipment is important to an extent, getting started, just do it, I think. For me, I have a Shure, I think it's SM7B mic. I'm currently using a Sony RX100 Mark V for the camera. I have a light, an Audition, and Premiere. That's the tools that I use. And then I think there's a soft piece of software for the Mac, and it's called Tag and then R. When you're looking at a podcast and the name of the file could be recording 1.mp whatever. So basically it converts that title into something that's understandable and readable, so the user can see the file and then be able to extract information from it. I forgot what it's called now.
Okay, that sounds useful. Hopefully I'll find it. I'll link that. But just starting a podcast, that's and just recording, that's like the roots of how I started podcasting. I actually use an app called Anchor. It's anchor.fm, and you can literally just download that app on your phone, hit record, hit publish, and you have a podcast. Like, that's it. And one of the big lessons, I think the biggest takeaway from this is just the quality is something that you can improve over time, but just releasing is the most important thing, because that's something that's up to you.
Yes.
So just hit record, hit publish, and once you're up and running, like, you're gonna notice that if you enjoy it, you're gonna keep doing it, and you're gonna find different ways to grow your podcast, to improve it and whatnot. So Anchor, I definitely recommend that. All the equipment, if you're interested in kind of using more higher quality equipment, especially if you're interested in it, because I definitely I'm looking towards improving my setup in the future, but I'm doing it incrementally so that I can continue to release episodes, and it's not stopping me from continuing to release. Is there anything else, Pradeep, you think would be worth mentioning here?
I think the duration of the episode, there are some episodes that I recorded were over an hour, and then some were about 30-40 minutes. So I think for season 2, I'm trying to keep a time limit so everybody knows it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever I choose, rather than having one episode which is an hour and 20 minutes, or whatever it is, it's some ridiculous amount, and then another episode being only 30 minutes, for example. So having a time limit, I think, gives the audience an expectation of what to expect. So let's say they're listening to the podcast in the car, and their journey is only 25 minutes. If the podcast is an hour and a half, they're not obviously going to listen to it on the journey,
Right.
but they might have to come back to it. So having each episode, having a set duration or try to keep to a duration, I think is something that I'm going to work on in season 2.
Yeah, setting a consistent expectation for the format of the episodes, I think, is definitely crucial as well.
Definitely. And if you're talking to somebody and it's an interview style, I think that's a skill that you develop as well. Asking the questions and getting the interviewee to start talking and in giving you these nuggets of information. So that is a skill in itself, in my opinion.
100%. And I'm trying to improve that myself. So,
Same here.
hope. Definitely thanks for joining me on this episode, and hope to have other guests. Maybe Elon might join in the future.
Definitely.
So just a quick recap. So some of the major lessons we talked about: ensure all your equipment is working. It's fine to re-record, do some test recordings to make sure that it's working. Releasing is the most important. Just get it out there, do what you need to. Just release your podcast, and then prepare notes for each episodes. Set expectations, write bullet lists for all the different things that you'll talk about, and just create a nice little structure that people will expect from your podcast. And I think that pretty much does it. What do you think, Pradip?
Absolutely. You summed it up very well. And once I get into season 2, I'd love to have you on my podcast.
That'd be awesome. I know you've shared some cool ideas with that. So I guess, do you want to plug any of your podcast, the notebook, anything else that you might want to plug?
Yep. So basically, the notebook is podcaststuffnotebook.com, and my podcast is theproductangle.com, and my personal blog is Pradip, Pradip, cloud.com. Thank you.
Definitely a big fan of all those things. So thanks again, Pradip, for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. I hope you learned from our lessons that we shared in this episode. You can find all the links to subscribe to the podcast, all the show notes for this episode, all the links that we mentioned, as well as the previous episodes that I published are all on the website, sunnycommutes.fm, which is actually powered by one of my side businesses, Iron Mike. So yeah, thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Thanks, Sunny.
All right. Awesome.